So today I will be reviewing the book Coffee, A Drink for the Devil by Paul Crystal. This book was published in 2016. I did read it on my phone, and since I'm recording on my phone, I printed a picture so you'd be able to see the whole cover of the book good. It was actually a really neat book. I did read this entire book cover to cover and every word on every page. So, a little about the book. The book dives deep into the history of coffee. It starts with how it was discovered, which was by a goat farmer, of all things, which is so crazy to learn. How it grew. It talked about all the bushes and the trees and how they picked it, and it was just, yeah, that was really cool to learn. It also dives into how it made its way around the world, what things were brought out of coffee, how coffee was banned. So those are some things like it really discussed in the book, and it also reflected a lot of things on today and back then. So that was awesome too. Like, it had a lot of good comparisons in the book. So I did enjoy this book. I do recommend it if you like to drink coffee and want to learn about how it came about and all the history of how it was made. So I did like the fact that it discussed all the views of coffee. So, it started off with how the monks drank it to stay energized and have devoted prayer time. And then it talked about how, I believe it was the Catholics. I would have to go back and double check, but if I remember correctly, it is the Catholics that originally banned it because it took away from faith. So they banned it because they viewed it the same as alcohol and tobacco. It then got brought back, and they would have things such as coffee houses, which was really neat to learn because, I go to a coffee shop almost every day, so just kind of learning how that used to be a thing back then as well. But it was mainly for men. So the men would get their news, and that's a lot of how the politics were spread, and people would go listen in and go back and go tell all the information that they learned that was being talked about them. And so it was really neat. And then it also talked a lot about how other things were brought in, such as pastries, and how pastries got brought in, and how other people would drink coffee. So some European king did not like watered down coffee, so he would put a flower petal at the bottom drawn onto his cup, and if he could see it, his coffee wasn't strong enough. And it just viewed on how people really drank coffee throughout this. So that was a really good thing, and it was very neat to see how it was viewed all throughout the world and how it was brought amongst the world. So coffee also in the United States, fun fact, was originated in Virginia. That was awesome to learn too. I will say it was a little hard to read just because we are using a lot of vocabulary from the 1600s, and that we're having to learn other words from around the world. So I did have to spend a lot of time looking at the book, and I would, on my phone, since I was reading it on my phone, one thing that it would discuss is I could copy the word and hit look up. So that did help speed up the process of having to read it, but I did feel like a lot of the information was repeated throughout the book. And it would talk about, in the first chapter, it would say, well, in comparison to today, but then at the end of the book, there's a whole chapter on today. So that was a little much. It was a bunch of unnecessary information repeated, but it was a good story overall. That is the one thing I did really enjoy about it, was just learning all the different ways it was portrayed throughout the years, and why it was actually called the Devil's Drink. So that was actually a really neat thing to learn about. I did enjoy getting to read all the little poems and fun facts about it, so that was awesome. But I didn't like how hard it was to read with a bunch of the vocabulary, and took up a bunch of my time just to kind of get the view of everything that was going on with it. I did start to think about this because it discussed on how it was a trade. So one thing that it said in this book was, other than petroleum, this was the second most traded thing in the world. This was in 2016, of course, so it could have changed between now and then. I'd have to do a little more research. But with that being said, in my lesson, since we're talking trade and value, I think this would be great for a kindergarten lesson. And we could do talking about money. So I would like to start off with a bartering simulation without money, and then build on to economic principle with money, and concepts of service with money. So those would be a good thing. I think since this book really just talked about how a lot of things were brought around the world and shared around the world, and how it really discussed the value of it too. The value of coffee in this book was really talked about. Like, it was just, well, these people valued it this way and these people valued it this way, and it just continued to build off the value. So as I was reading this book, I was thinking, what would be something good to really build this off of? And so the more it talked about trade and building money, so the two things I thought of was, we could discuss things such as culture, or we can discuss such things as money. Well, since money is something that was really it wasn't necessarily money talked about in this, but it was more of the trading and how it was brought around the world. I thought a good thing to bring would be the trading. So, with that being said, I did find a standard, and that would be a kindergarten standard in economics, and that would be a face value of an item and money and all that other stuff. So with that being said, the first strategy I would like to bring into is the bartering. So this would give the students a good idea as to, well, you have a pencil and I have a pen, let's trade. So each of these things would have a face value to the students with no price tag behind it, so they can understand the value of, well, I think this is a fair trade, and I'm going to give you this, and I'm going to keep this. And this would go on until, you know, they understand the concept of this has a value, but it doesn't have a price. So then we'd apply the economic principle with money and have something like a little coffee shop or a hot chocolate shop, since that'd be more age appropriate. But I do like the fact that this lesson itself is buildable. Like, this is something you can do all throughout elementary, but since the standard really focuses in kindergarten, I'm going to go ahead and focus with that. So since we are building with money, I think personally that we could go ahead and have like a little hot chocolate shop, and this would be something that they can bring with their play money, and they can buy something that day with it. So I would provide something like Monopoly money, and I would have my prices: whipped cream 50 cents, hot chocolate $2. And this would have them build a concept of, okay, well, I have $5 and I can only spend X amount of money. So this would give them the concept of, well, I get an item, so here's your money. This would give them that new sense of bartering, but with money. Then I would like to build this on with concepts of service. So we could start off with, have you ever had your hair cut? Well, have you ever noticed that you have to give money? Well, what about the people in the schools? You see teachers, they help and they get money. And oh, well, you see down here at Walmart, you go through the aisle and you grab your groceries, and at the end, after you get your groceries, you trade those groceries for money. So this would be a good way to continue to build that concept, and that is something that can go on further and further and further throughout elementary with them to understand more of a concept level of money and the trading system. I think it's a very neat way to truly build that concept and everything with it. But with that being said, this book ties into those because this is something that we use every single day. For instance, like I previously stated, I go get a coffee nearly every day. I have to give my money for that. Well, this is a good way to build that concept for those kids as well. So it connects something that we do every day into past life situations. So that's a good way for kindergarten economics to be built, and this would be good for further information in into elementary school.